Now, here is our second practice problem under algebra for grade 12. It starts off with 1.1 where we need to solve for x. And the first question is x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. Here we have a trinomial, particularly a quadratic trinomial, so we can factorize this. Now, this is your basic factorization of a trinomial which comes from grade 10. Remember, to do this, we look at the last term. We need factors of the last term. When we multiply, they're going to give us negative 6. But when we add them, we need to get negative 5. Now, factors of 6 would be 1 and 6, 2 and 3. However, remember that you need to multiply these so that you get negative 6, which means that one factor needs to be positive, the other needs to be negative. Now, with that in mind, we realize that 1 and 6 would be perfect for this. But how can we manipulate the signs? We should have a positive 1 and a negative 6. Positive 1 times negative 6 is negative 6, and 1 minus 6 gives you negative 5. So we're going to open up two brackets. In one bracket, we will have x plus 1. In the other bracket, x minus 6. Take each bracket equated to 0 separately. You get x is equal to negative 1 or x is equal to positive 6. Now for 1.1.2, we've got x minus 3 times x minus 4 is equal to 16. And it says correct to 2 decimal places. That means use the quadratic formula. But remember, in order for you to use the quadratic formula, your equation needs to be in standard quadratic format. Just to remind you, this is what standard quadratic format is. Ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So you have to have the 0 on the right hand side. Now, firstly, let's simplify the left by multiplying out these brackets. We've got a binomial times a binomial. We can use the FOIL method here. We have 3x times x, which will be 3x squared. 3x times negative 4 is negative 12x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. And negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. At the same time, let's take the 16 from the right-hand side over to the left. When it goes over, it becomes negative 16, and we now have 0 on the right. Simplifying the left-hand side, we've got 3x squared. Here's like terms. Negative 12x minus x would be negative 13x. We have positive 4 minus 16, which is going to be negative 12. That is equal to 0. So now that we have the equation in standard quadratic format, we can now use the quadratic formula. Substituting in here, your b value is negative 13. A is 3. C is negative 12. Now remember, it's always good for you to simplify what you have. So we've got negative times negative 13, which gives you positive 13. Underneath the square root, you get 313. And in your denominator, 2 times 3 gives you 6. Now here's your two x values. You should get 5.12 or x is equal to a negative 0.78. Always pay careful attention to how many decimal places the question specifies. Here they wanted 2 decimal places, which is what you are used to doing. Now 1.1.3 we see is an inequality. So we have 4x minus x squared is greater than or equal to 0. Now between both your terms on the left, you notice that x is common. So let us pull out x as a common factor. In the first term, you're left with 4. In the second term, you're left with negative x. Now here's the thing. And this may be something that's very easy to overlook. Since you are solving for x, ideally, you would like x in your bracket to be positive, not negative like how we have it. So to change that to a positive, we're going to swap those 2 terms around. We have negative x plus 4. And in the next step, we can pull out the negative in front. What's going to happen? It goes to the front of the expression. And inside the bracket, we now have x minus 4. This was actually something common that you did in grade 10. Remember the part where you were simplifying fractions, and often your brackets would have x being negative, so you had to pull out the negative sign as a common factor. Okay, so this actually comes from there. Now, since we've pulled out the negative in front of the expression, we need to get rid of that negative. And one way to do that is to divide this inequality by a negative sign. But remember what happens. There is a golden rule with inequalities that says when you divide throughout by a negative sign, the sign changes. When I say the sign changes, I mean the inequality changes. It's going to go from being a greater than to a less than. Now at this point, you need to remember that you are not solving for x. This is not an equation. So nowhere in your working out are you allowed to write down equal to. Yes, we have the equal to accompanied with the inequality, but you cannot write an equal to sign on its own. Instead, those values that x would be equal to are known as your inequalities. So from the first part, you would see x could be 0, or from the brackets, x could be positive 4. Now, based on what the sign became, it's now less than or equal to. We know that we are going to have one answer written together. Remember, smaller value goes on the left, bigger value on the right. So how we read this is x lies between 0 and 4. Now, looking at 1.1.4, in our numerator, we've got 5 to the power 2x minus 1. And in the denominator, we have 5 to the power x plus 1 is equal to 4. This is quite an interesting question because while it is testing you on solving for x, it is also testing you on exponents. So here we have x as the exponent. And there's something quite interesting about this question, because your numerator and denominator both contain x as the exponent, and they are both actually related to each other. The first thing I want you to notice is 5 to the power 2x can be written as 5 to the power x all squared, because you know from laws of exponents that you can multiply the exponents and you will get 5 to the power 2x. Then I'm going to say minus 1, and I'll keep the denominator as is for now. But my aim of writing this as 5 to the power x all squared is for you to realize that your numerator is in the format of difference of 2 squares. So we can actually factorize that. We're going to open up 2 brackets, and it's going to be 5 to the power x minus 1, 5 to the power x plus 1. So yes, difference of 2 squares, because the 5 to the power x was squared and 1 is a square number. Now what you realize is that you've got 5 to the power x plus 1 in the numerator, and it matches with the denominator, so they can cancel out with each other. Let's write down what we're left with. 5 to the power x minus 1 is equal to 4. We can take the minus 1 over to the right. It adds on. We have 5. Now, you guys learned in grade 9 that when you're solving for x as an exponent, you need to get the bases to be the same. Once the bases are the same, they cancel out and we equate the exponents. On the right-hand side, 5 has an exponent of 1. Now that the bases cancel out, you see that x is equal to 1 is your final answer. And for 1.2, we need to solve simultaneously for x and y. So here's what we're given. And we notice that it's actually a lot easier to start off with the first equation. We can easily make x the subject of the formula by taking the 3y over to the right. Now that we know what x is, we can take that value for x and substitute into the second equation wherever we have x. Doing so, here's what you get, and please notice that whenever we substitute, we always substitute in a bracket. So here we had x squared, it becomes 2 minus 3y all squared. Now, squaring a binomial results in a trinomial. Remember, to get the first term, you square the first term. To get the middle term, you multiply both terms together and you times by 2. To get the third term, we square the second term. Now, to multiply into this bracket, we are going to multiply positive 4y. So positive 4y times 2 is positive 8y. Positive 4y times negative 3y is negative 12y squared. And we've got minus 5 next to that. Now gathering like terms, here is what we get. Oh, I realized there should be a square here. Now gathering like terms, we've got 9y squared minus 12y squared, which gives you negative 3y squared. Negative 12y plus 8y is going to be negative 4y. And 4 minus 5 is negative 1. Since all of these terms are negative, where ideally we would like them to be positive, we can divide throughout by the negative. So we get 3y squared plus 4y plus 1 equals 0. Now at this point, you can use any method of your choice. If you're good with factorizing, you can do that. If you want to use the quadratic formula, that's up to you as well. You should get the same values regardless of the method that you use. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with factorizing. And in the first bracket, I would have 3y plus 1. In the second bracket, y plus 1. Solving for y from each bracket, I get y is equal to negative 1 over 3, or y is equal to negative 1. Now that I know what my y values are, I can take these values and substitute into the previous equation in place of y. Doing so, here is what I get. My x values are positive 3 and positive 5. Now there is a 1.3 in this paper, but I will be covering it in the next video. Make sure you check that out because that question is not your average algebra question. It is not in the typical format of your question 1.